by President Cyril Ramaphosa that he'll appoint a new Minister of Electricity has fueled a lot of debate among South Africans. Unions and civil society groups have questioned the move, and the decision to base the minister in the presidency has also raised eyebrows. This is government's latest attempt to fix the country's energy crisis. Well, to help us unpack this further, I am joined by energy expert Matthew Cruz. A very good afternoon to you, Matthew. Thank you so much for joining us. This has had a lot of people either being incredibly amused that there needs to be a designated minister who's going to earn a salary, mind you, a very handsome salary, just to try and deal with something that a lot of people feel it's not going to be that easy to deal with. Do we need a Minister of Electricity?
Well, thank you for having me on the show. I personally do like the move from the presidency to reconsolidate the overseeing of Eskom and this new energy minister coming into being. I like it because it represents an opportunity for someone that is technically competent in the energy sector to step up to the plate and that already has knowledge of how to fix Eskom, coming into the position and then implementing things, pretty much hitting the ground running and making immediate change. So it remains to be seen who exactly is picked for the job.
But what then happens if we see another case of cadre deployment? So you just take one of the other ministers that perhaps would have not been in a portfolio that had any influence, or wasn't really something that kept that minister busy enough, and they take that minister or that former minister or the deputy minister for that matter and put them in that portfolio. So essentially we're just recycling ministers, and you're not really bringing in perhaps an engineer, because that is one of the things we know we do need to go and fix Eskom. Perhaps bring an engineer, somebody with the right kind of skills and expertise, and we just see somebody that is just an ordinary politician who is going to be there to fulfill his own political agendas.
Yes, that's 100% correct with that commentary. And one thing that I was thinking about while watching the SONA and the announcements of an energy minister, when the presidency announced it, I thought to myself, well, which of the ministers in the room has not had the opportunity yet that is actually technically competent, that would do a good job? And I thought to myself, well, it's been a long time. It's been 20 years. All of the ministers hasn't really changed that much. Everyone that's in the room has already been tried. So I don't actually see just another minister being moved around from another cabinet into this very important role. And I really do think that the presidency is considering this very seriously, because it's such a key thing, the energy crisis, that we've gone into a national state of disaster. So I doubt it'll be someone that's just redeployed from another cabinet. What I do see is someone coming in that does have engineering experience, that hopefully has experience within Eskom. I can think of one name in particular that I haven't seen in the media as yet, Dr. Titus Mathy, my previous head of department in technology. I would love to see someone coming in that has no taint of corruption to their name, that has already worked in the energy sector, specifically in Eskom, and has respect from their colleagues, but has left Eskom, that is brought back in, that already has a good understanding of what needs fixing in Eskom. So that's my hope for this position.
One of the other questions that was asked is, so you appoint a Minister of Electricity. There is still a minister responsible for state-owned entities, one of them being Eskom. What then becomes Minister Pravin Gordhan's role? And I think the presidency sought to clarify that Minister Pravin Gordhan would still be very much involved in Eskom, because he's somewhat of you could put him as a shareholder in Eskom. So there still needs to be, that oversight from the Minister of State-Owned Enterprises as the organization itself, but somebody that tackles the actual electricity crisis, somebody that goes down, boots on the ground, deals with the failing stations, power stations and such, and what exactly it is that needs to be done right there in the power stations. That's not something a Minister of State-Owned Enterprises deals with directly. Here we're dealing with somebody that, as you've mentioned, the name that you threw out, Mr. Titus himself, you go in there and you know exactly which plug needs to be either removed or replaced and such. So the nitty-gritties is what a Minister of Electricity will be dealing with. But what then really realistically becomes the role of Pravin Gordhan in hand with the Minister of Electricity?
That's a great question. I actually see a handing over of responsibilities from Pravin Gordhan to the new energy minister, and the eventual stepping away of the oversight that Pravin currently provides. And just to comment on Pravin's inputs, I was in Eskom during the time that he would come and ask the very difficult questions of what is actually going on at a power station when a coal conveyor belt broke and who was in charge of that system. And he does ask very good granular questions on the ground to figure out what's going on and what's going wrong at the power stations. But I think it was beyond his control. No matter how much he provided oversight and brought good ideas, it was beyond his control, the decline that we've seen at the old power stations until now, with our energy availability factor dipping below 50% by the end of the year. So that's why the new person that comes in, if I mentioned Dr. Titus Matthew, if he comes in, he already has a good understanding of how the power stations work. He doesn't need to be onboarded too much, like Andre De Ruyter was onboarded for a year to get a good understanding of Eskom. I would love to see someone that already has a good functional understanding of what the problems are that need fixing within Eskom.
From what you've heard from the president and what it is that they're trying to do in terms of fixing the energy crisis short term, obviously the calls from South Africans, you need to get rid of this problem completely, permanently, and may it never be something we deal with again. But it's been a problem we're dealing with for almost 16 years now. So that might just be, a dream that we're having. But, other experts have spoken about how we could be dealing with this problem at least at this intensity for another 2 years. From what you've heard from the president and what it is he's put in place with those who he's working with and those he's feeding from, are you convinced that they actually know what they are doing or what they do need to do to try and alleviate the problem, that we're not finding ourselves at stage 6, 5, 4, and 3, and then at the very best, in a couple of months, we're at least at stage 1?
So that's the presidency did announce that he foresees load shedding being reduced and that gap closing within 12 to 18 months. But our projections, Home Energy projects that load shedding will double over the next 5 years. And I actually see the load shedding increasing by 50% this year alone. So I do not think this problem is going to go away within 2 years. I think that we're going to have an escalation of load shedding, unfortunately, over the next 5 years. Because from everything that the president said, what we didn't see is any announcements of large-scale generation capacity being deployed by the government. We saw opening up of private sector being able to come onto the grid. We saw very excitingly the solar incentivization that's going to come from SARS, where you had a tax rebates, and also the bounce back loans being utilized so that industry and businesses can receive capital for solar installations. So we saw really good moves like that, but we didn't see anything that really will bring a lot of generation capacity onto the grid anytime within the next 3 years, unfortunately. So that's why I see load shedding still increasing over the next 5 years.
Matthew, my time is up. So I'm going to ask you to keep it as briefly as you possibly can. This is almost like a layman's kind of question. This is a man on the ground kind of question who's watching this interview and thinking to himself, I was watching Sona and my president was telling me all these beautiful things about how, yes, things will improve, things will get better. But literally almost every energy expert that eNCA on every show has had that we've spoken to has given us a doom and gloom kind of prediction, a doom and gloom kind of situation. Is the president and everybody in that cabinet, particularly the energy minister and the minister of state-owned enterprises, are they talking to the right people? Are they talking to Matthew Cruz? Are they talking to energy experts, engineers, the people that know exactly what the problem is, and the people that are giving us a reality shock to say that you're not going to have this dealt with, sufficiently in 2 years' time. In fact, it's only going to get worse for you in 5 years' time. Are they talking to you guys who know your stuff?
So this is a question I really did ask myself up until this point, and thankfully we've just got confirmation that we're going to be meeting with the presidency, Home Energy, next week to hear our inputs in terms of what's taking place within the sector. So finally we're getting in a position where we can provide some input and give it how we see it. And when I sit there, I'm going to say to them, listen, we've got these old coal power stations coming over the next 5 years offline, and there's not really any plan to replace them with large-scale generation capacity. So therefore, simple truth is I think we're going to have load shedding increasing. So thankfully we are starting to get a voice and we're starting to be listened to, which is great.
Hopefully that it's not just an invitation to the table for you guys to have some finger food and then some smiles and take some photos, and that they actually do listen to what it is you guys know, to what it is you guys have to say, and the input that you can give to them that could help us as South Africans avoid a crisis in 5 years' time that we may not ever be able to come out of. Matthew, we're going to leave it there with you. Thank you so much for joining us here on Today. That is energy expert Matthew Cruz, of course, just painting a very bleak picture for South Africa to say that your president is saying the situation will be a little better in 18 months to 2 years. But as somebody that deals with this kind of stuff on a day-to-day basis, you're going to actually have a bigger problem mind you, never mind a solution in about 5 years' time. But hopefully the presidency is inviting all the experts and people that do know and actually listens to what it is they have to say. Let's move over